Okay, I read 20 books in October. So I thought I would recap everything I read in October, what I liked, what I didn't like, and give you my reviews and ratings. Let's do it. So I thought that I would do my reviews, my recaps in groupings of genres. So I'm going to start with the romance books. So I read, 7 romance books. Of the 20 books that I read, 7 were romance. So the first one is Main Character Energy by Jamie Varon. I did read this one on my Kindle, and I've read another book by Jamie Varon that was nonfiction. So I was excited to read Main Character Energy, and I didn't love it. But I didn't hate it either. You know, it was good. It just wasn't one of my favorites. So this is a story about a woman who wanted to be a novelist, but really had given up her dreams for that and was writing listicles for like a popular website. Her older brother had become the novelist that she essentially wanted to become, and she just wasn't really happy. She had reconnected with her aunt, her estranged aunt, because her mom and her aunt did not get along, and had this like annual lunch with her aunt, and then finds out that her aunt died and left her a plane ticket and kind of a vacation in France, asking her to spend the time writing her novel. So it's the story of her awakening, if you will, while she's in France and going through this process of kind of learning more about her aunt, learning more about herself, and of course falling in love. And it was a sweet story. There was just something very a lot of times I don't like a lot of inner dialogue of the characters in books. It's like where they're questioning themselves a lot, and I felt like this one had that. But it was a cute story, and I enjoyed it. It just wasn't my favorite. I gave Main Character Energy 3 stars. Okay, next up in the romance category was Wildfire by Hannah Grace. And this was the second book in the series after Icebreaker, which I really enjoyed. The characters are college students, and in Icebreaker, it was a figure skater and a hockey player that were kind of forced together because of issues with the ice rink. And so in this one, it is 2 characters from kind of overlapping friend groups. So you get a lot of the friends from the first Icebreaker book into this one that hook up like on the last day of school, the last party of school, and then plan to go their separate ways for summer. They both end up being counselors at a camp where they're counselors all summer long. So part of the rules are that they can't, hook up while they're at camp because they're in charge of the kids. But they find ways around that, and there's all this miscommunication of I thought you didn't like me and it was just a one-night stand, all that kind of stuff. So it was cute. I liked Icebreaker better. I also had some issues at the beginning of this book kind of getting used to all the characters again, because they just jump right in, and it's like you're already supposed to remember all the characters from the previous book, and these are pretty significantly sized friend groups. But it was fun. It's a little bit spicy, especially for college kids. I guess I don't know why they wouldn't be, but it's just you think about like some of the level of spice in there that people would be a little bit older. But it was cute. I would definitely start with Icebreaker and then read this one right after, and you might like this one better than I did just because you'll have that continuation of the story. I did give it 4 stars, so clearly I liked it. So check it out. Okay, next romance book is Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey, and I loved this book. This is the newest one from famed romance author Tessa Bailey. She does fantastic romances that are very spicy. Her commentary on social media is also really funny, so I suggest following her on Instagram and TikTok. So in Wreck the Halls, I actually listened to this as an audiobook. And in this one, we've got 2 kids of famous rock stars that were once in a group together. There was like a female rock band that broke up while the 2 women were pregnant. And one had a boy, Beat, and the other one had a girl, Melody. And they never knew each other growing up, but they knew of each other. They didn't know each other because their moms hated each other. So fast forward to they're almost 30 years old, and someone wants to reunite the band and do a reality TV show. And both of them agreed to do it to try to reunite their moms and their band. And so over the course of that process, they, of course, fall in love. And it is, it's really good. It's spicy. There's a lot of tension. There's all this like music integrated into it. I really enjoyed this. And sometimes Tessa Bailey's novels are a little bit like too dirty for me. Not too dirty. Maybe it's like the man is just like too aggressive, maybe. I don't know how to describe it, but this one was sweet and really good. Like the melody is more innocent and not as worldly as Beat, but Beat like definitely falls hard for her. And they're followed around by reality TV cameras the whole time, so everybody can see it. It's like live streamed, which is a cool aspect of it. So this was definitely a fun one, and I recommend for the holidays. 5 stars. Next up, romance. Meet Me in the Margins by Melissa Ferguson. I've read this one on my Kindle, and I gave it 5 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. It's a very sweet novel. There's not spice in this one at all, really. But it's about a woman who works for a publishing company, a book publishing company, and she's secretly writing her own novel, and a copy of it gets left in her kind of like secret hiding place at the office, and someone starts editing it for her and leaving her notes, and so they pass notes back and forth, and as they edit her novel, and of course they fall in love. It's romance, that's what happens. But it really made me feel like I was reading a book version of You've Got Mail. In fact, as soon as I finished this book, I started watching You've Got Mail again because it's been so long since I've watched it, and it just felt like a good heartwarming fall movie. And so I really enjoyed Meet Me in the Margins. It was cute and sweet. Okay, because I loved Meet Me in the Margins so much, I went and looked for other books by Melissa Ferguson and found Famous for a Living. And this is, I think I listened to the audio version of this book, and I did not like it as much as Meet Me in the Margins. So, you know, it's kind of hit or miss. But in Famous for a Living, the main character, female, is a lifestyle influencer and does something that gets her canceled. And so in her kind of purgatory of waiting for everything to blow over, she moves with her uncle to Montana and works for the national park, where she meets a park ranger who she ultimately falls in love with. It felt kind of preachy. This book had like some, you know, all the things that are bad for you about social media, and it just, I don't know, it was kind of a downer. I mean, of course they end up happily ever after because, again, it's a romance novel and you know what to expect, but I didn't love the story as much as I did Meet Me in the Margins. I gave it 3 stars, and it was very sweet, no spice in that romance either. Next romance was Caught Up by Liz Tomforde, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, but I read this one on my Kindle as well, and this is part of a series that she's done for like athletes in Chicago. So the first one, I think, was hockey players. There's been a basketball player, and this may be the 3rd. This is either the 3rd or the 4th book. I can't remember. And I've liked all of them so far. Caught Up was cute. Again, it was, in this one, it's a baseball player, and he is a single dad. He goes through nannies very quickly because he doesn't think anybody's good enough for his son. So temporarily, the team manager's, the team coach's daughter, who is a professional chef but needing a little bit of a break, becomes his nanny for the summer. So they both know it's temporary, and you can guess what happens. But it was kind of interesting just because she had her own kind of very big professional career. She's a worldwide famous pastry chef, and he is a pitcher for this baseball team, so he's famous as well. And there's not really a power struggle, which is always good, I think, when you're dealing with romance novels, a little bit more on equal footing. And it was fun. I like these. I like the other ones better. I like the first one for sure better, which I can't remember the name of right now. But you can look up her, I think it's like Windswept or Windy City series or something like that. But it was good. I liked it. I'm glad I read it. So I gave Caught Up 4 stars. And then on the spice level, I would say it's pretty spicy. There's some good sex scenes in this one. Okay, last in the romance category is Rock Bottom Girl by Lucy Score. And this was one I also read on my Kindle. It's a woman who has lost her job, is kind of in between jobs right now, and is forced to move home to live with her parents and take a temporary teaching job at her old high school while she figures out what's next. And she has really bad memories from high school. Her last year, she was bullied and pulled some pranks that got her banned for life from homecoming. And so she's nervous about being back. And the guy that she had a crush on, he's the track coach and she's the soccer coach. And she's really kind of struggling to find her way, but they connect and you kind of get back in with all of her old high school memories, and it does a little bit of back and forth kind of time shifting to tell that story. And ultimately she has to decide if she's going to stay there or if she's going to choose to have a career just so that she kind of has that prestige of a certain career, or does she want happiness and to live in her hometown with the people that she loves. So I like Lucy Score as an author. I did not love this particular book, so I only gave it 2 stars. It's a little bit spicy, but I didn't even really get into the sex scenes on this one either. So, it's a fun read if you're just kind of looking for something light, but not necessarily great. All right, next category is YA, or young adult books. And some of these, I'm putting them in their own category, even though one of them is a romance novel and the other 2 are thrillers, but they all were targeted to the young adult. So the first one is Woke Up Like This by Amy Lee. And this made me feel like it was kind of a cross between 13 going on 30 and the Netflix show Never Have I Ever. It's about 2 students, a male and a female, who are in their senior year of high school and sworn enemies. They compete for everything. They're both on student council, and they're preparing for prom. They're decorating, and they fall down, hit their heads, and when they wake up, they're 30 years old. So and they're there together. Like, they both know that they've done this time shift thing. So they're trying to figure out what's happening, but when they wake up, they're engaged to be married. So they're having to go to their engagement party, go to parents' houses for dinner, that kind of thing. And of course, they end up figuring out that they like each other along the way, and have to resolve that when they finally get back to being 17 years old. And then when they're 17, they have to navigate whether or not the other person remembers what happened at the 30-year mark or not. So it's cute. It's very cute. And it did feel very movie-like I said. So I enjoyed this. If you like sweet, romances, again, young adult, so there's no spice here whatsoever. It's a cute book. The next YA book that I read was The Naturals, which is a thriller. And I listened to this on audiobook. It's also part of a series. So actually the next 2 books I listened to were part of that series. The first one is The Naturals. The next one is Killer Instinct. So the premise is that these high school students have a natural ability to help the FBI in their crime solving. So one is like a human lie detector test. One has kind of a photographic memory and mathematical genius. 2 others are profilers, so they can just meet somebody and kind of understand who that person is and what their kind of motivations are. And then another can read emotions on people's faces. And so they all are recruited by the FBI. They live in a house together with a guardian, and they're trained by the FBI, and then they help solve FBI cases. And they all have some particular trauma in their past. And so what I've discovered, because I'm now listening to the third book, but I haven't finished it yet, is that each of the books has some sort of more revealing case about each one of the members of the Naturals. So the first book, our main character in all of the books is Cassie. So she's the newest recruit. She's a profiler. Her mom was murdered when she was 12 years old, and she joins the Naturals. So we get the background when she joins, and there is a serial killer, and she discovers that a lot of the women that are being killed look very similar to her mom, so they think there's some sort of tie to her mom's case. And so that leads into the solving of that crime. It does feel very like Criminal Intent, if you've ever watched that show, but on a teenage level. There's also some subplots happening with Cassie and two of the guys that are in the house. Like, if they're like a love story type thing happening there. But overall, it's a pretty dark novel, especially for something that's YA, but it's interesting. And so that's the Naturals, and then Killer Instinct is the second book in the series, and in that one of the other kids, his name is Dean, his father was a serial killer and he's in jail, but now somebody is recreating his crimes, essentially, like following all of the rule book, and so they have to dig in to figure out what's going on with that. So you learn more about Dean in that second book. I think I gave the first book a 3 and the second book a 4. And of course now I'm reading the third book, so I clearly like the series. I think it's really interesting, and it's something different and far removed from the romance novels that I read before I go to bed. So you should definitely check it out. If you like thrillers, it's pretty interesting. Okay, next category I'm calling historical fiction. That's probably not like the best name for it, or these two books don't necessarily go together that well. The first one is A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. And I picked this up because I read Deanna Raybourn's newest book earlier this year. It was called Killers of a Certain Age, and I really, really liked it. So it was about these 5 or 6 women that were retired assassins, and they had to get pulled back into the game for whatever reason. So it was really interesting. Well, A Curious Beginning is more, it's categorized on Amazon as a Victorian romance and a historical mystery. So your main character is a woman who lives in the 1800s, right? The late 1800s. And her guardians have just died, and she's out adventuring on her own. She's kind of a take no bullshit kind of woman, very different for that day and age. And she collects butterflies, or she's a butterfly expert, and doesn't really know a lot about her family history. But she was taken in by 2 women that were her aunts. They said they were her aunts, and she was raised by them. So when the last one dies and she's packing up to go off on her next adventure, someone comes and tries to kidnap her or kill her. They're not really sure. So she gets kind of wrapped up into this other world of trying to figure out what's going on with that before she goes off on her next travels and adventures and butterfly hunting. And so, I mean, it's fun. I don't love historical stuff all that much, and there's a whole series related to this character in this book, but I didn't pick up the next one. I might eventually, if I kind of run out of things to do. I listen to this as an audiobook, so if I'm looking for a fun audiobook that's kind of mindless, I might pick it up. But There's a tinge of romance there. She's a worldly woman, which again is very unusual about the time. I don't know. It was fine, but I was kind of disappointed because I love Killers of a Certain Age so much, and this just wasn't anywhere near that. Okay, next up in the historical fiction category is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. And I wanted to love this. I did, but I did not. I really, really struggled to get through this book. I love Zadie Smith. I do. I love White Teeth. I love On Beauty. I've read most of her books, and I really, really like them. I did not like this. This is historical fiction, which she normally doesn't write. So it, again, is set in the 1800s, and 1800s England. It is loosely based on a true story on real characters, but fictionalized around what really happened, because we don't know. I'm trying to figure out, I even have a hard time describing what happens in this book. There's a female main character, and she is widowed and goes to live with her cousin, but it's not really her cousin, it's her husband's cousin. So she ultimately has an affair with him at one point, but it's on again, off again, and he marries twice, and she lives with him during both the marriages and kind of helps nanny the kids. At one point, she may have had a relationship with his first wife. I don't know. So there's that part of it, but the historical, it's hard. The cousin is also a writer. He's a novelist, and so there's a lot of commentary on novelists and stealing ideas, and he's friends with Charles Dickens, and so there's a little piece of Charles Dickens in here, but not really enough to even mention, although people talk about that as related to this book, but I don't get it. There's a trial happening that people get kind of obsessed with, and she gets obsessed with it along with her cousin's new wife, and it's about a man who is claiming to be of great wealth, but he was hiding his identity, and now he's trying to reclaim his identity, so that's the fraud part of it, but fraud also relates to the novelist. You see, I can't even describe what the book is about. I'm sorry, I just really did not like this book, and I am embarrassed to say it. Maybe I'm not smart enough to understand the book. I don't know. There's a New York Times article that does a review of this book. Just read that. You'll be fine. That way, if anybody brings it up, you can talk about the book in that context. Next category I'm calling Cozy Mysteries. And I read 2 books. They are part of a series. So I read the first one as a physical book, and I read the second one as an audiobook. So it's called Smile Beach Murder by Alicia Bassett, and the second one is called Murder on Mustang Beach. And so same character, same community, and they're cute. So the premise here is that our main character is a journalist, and she gets laid off from her job, so she has to go back to her hometown. She gets a job at a local bookstore, and after she'd been there for not very long, one of her old friends dies by falling off of the top of a lighthouse, which is the same way that our main character's mom died however many years ago. So she wants to try to investigate because she doesn't feel like the police are doing a very good job, and that the newspaper is not doing a very good job. So there's that. She's kind of putting her nose into business that people think is not hers, because that's what she does as a journalist, and it's also related to her mom and her friends. So she's investigating all that, finds trouble for herself, of course. It's very like adult Nancy Drew. And she does have a love interest that they touch on, but you really get more of that in the second book, which is Murder on Mustang Beach. So Murder on Mustang Beach is, I think a year has passed. Yeah, about a year has passed. It's the end of this novel. And there's another mysterious murder, and she now is known for being able to solve mysteries. So the police actually engage her help on this one. And they're fun. They're fun mysteries. They're fun light mysteries. I mean, they're not funny. There are some dark aspects of it. I mean, like, but I enjoyed them. So I'll pick up these if Alicia Bassett writes any more of the Outer Banks Bookshop mystery books. I'll definitely pick them up because those are good light reads. They're fun. I think books is a lot to review in one video. Okay, last category is fantasy. And I'm going to go specifically fantasy romance. Never thought I'd be a fantasy girl, but here we are. Okay, the first one is called Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But I do love this book with the red tipped pages. It's really cute. So, Assistant to the Villain, I'm going to call it a lightweight fantasy. It's very light and fun. So our main character, Evie, is down on her luck, needs a job. She lives in a small town near a place where somebody called the Villain lives. And the villain is always described as, this old, ugly man who terrorizes everybody. One day she meets him in the forest because he's hiding out from hunters, and he is anything but old and ugly and scary, of course. He is, in fact, a villain, though. And through their conversation, he ends up offering her a job as his assistant. She comes on and, of course, immediately befriends everybody on his staff and turns his life around from an organizational standpoint, running his quote-unquote business. But he's still a villain, but you get to know kind of why he's the villain and more interesting aspects. And they have this obvious attraction, but they never act on it. But all the people around them say, hey, it's clear that y'all are attracted to each other. Anyway, it's very cute. I liked it. Of course, I get to the end and it makes reference to there being a next book. So I don't think it comes out till next year. So it ends on a cliffhanger. I will definitely pick up the second book. Loved the characters. Thought it was a lot of fun. So Assistant to the Villain if you're looking for kind of a light, dip your toe into fantasy. Now for the big fantasy series. I started the From Blood and Ash series in October, and I finished the Blood and Ash series in October. Now, the next set of books is the Flesh and Fire series that kind of are interwoven in these, but it's billed as a separate series. So I'm starting that one next, but I did read all of the ones that are officially the Blood and Ash novels, and I am, of course, obsessed. I mean, they're thick books. These are big boys, and I got through them all. So let me just tell you a little bit about them. So, From Blood and Ash. So the premise is that we have Poppy, who is a quote-unquote maiden in this world. So she is pure, untouched. She wears a veil everywhere she goes. She's 19 years old. She doesn't really get exposed to much in the world, but she's smart and observant. Now, she is supposed to ascend, but we don't really know what that is at the beginning of this book, soon. So that means that it's a blessing upon from the gods upon a certain group of wealthy people in this fantasy world where they become almost immortal. And their whole future depends on her, but she doesn't know why or how or any of that. She just knows that she's important and she's protected. One of her guards, because she's guarded all day, every day, wants her to be able to protect herself should something ever happen to her. So he trains her with knives and weapons in secret, and nobody knows about it. So she has that going for her. But there is this constant battle between the world of the Ascended in Solace, and Atlantia, the world of Atlantia, They've been at war for many, many years, and so that's one of the reasons that she's always guarded, is because they're worried that the people of Atlantia will try to come and take her and ruin the future for the people of Solace. Okay, so that's Poppy, our maiden. Then we've got Hawk, who works to become one of her guards, and he's an unlikely pick because he hasn't been well known in the guard whatever for very long, but he's chosen to be her guard. And ultimately there's an attack on her and somebody tries to kidnap her. There's attack on the castle where she lives. So the queen sends for her, and she's going to have to go back to the capital where she can be more well protected. All right, well, all hell breaks loose then, and she starts learning more truths about what Ascension really means and what the war between Atlantia and Solace has really been about. And she's also catching some feelings for Hawk. And so that's where we are in this book. And I'm gonna tell you, the books are spicy. There's a reason they are fantasy romance. There's some serious sex happening in all of these books. So don't let the fact that it's about a maiden fool you, because she ain't a maiden for long. Okay? So the thing about these books is they're thick, but they're easy reads. It does not take fairly very long to read them. I mean, I read all of these. And every single one of them ends on a cliffhanger. So just, if you're going to get in it, just go ahead and buy them all, because you're going to want to read them. And they're good. Now, I will say, okay, so the first one kind of sets the premise for it. Book 2 is a Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. And this one was great because of just the back and forth between Poppy and Hawk, now Castile. And it's really kind of their love story and their coming together and the love-hate banter that they have going back and forth. And so I really enjoyed the second book, and the cliffhanger on this one is, like, I kid you not, I put this book down and immediately picked up the third book to start reading. So definitely a good one. Third book was The Crown of Gilded Bones. Oh yeah, this one was good too. This one was really good too. So this third book, it's really Poppy learning more about herself, learning more about Atlantia, because she's now left Solace and she's in Atlantia, and how she and Castile are going to work together to overthrow the other queen. And it ends on a cliffhanger that, of course, made me immediately pick up the fourth book, which I did not like. Hated this book. This was The War of Two Queens, and I think I didn't like this fourth book because it's a war book. I mean, it tells you what it is. It's a war book. And, you know, the previous one felt more like a love story with, like, this, you know, there's conflict throughout, but they felt more like a love story in the works, whereas this is, like, truly a battle book. And so it was just tedious to get through, in my opinion. Now, they did get some big reveals in the end, which they have to do because they want you to pick up book number 5, A Soul of Ash and Blood. And as a testament to how much of a hold this series has on me, A Soul of Ash and Blood is quite literally a retelling of the first book from Blood and Ash, but from Castile's perspective, because Poppy is in stasis, so she's asleep throughout this whole book. So it's basically Castile's point of view of their meeting and coming together in the first book. And so I was not even excited to pick this book up and read it, but I was determined because I've made it this far in the series, and I read the whole damn thing in 2 days, and the interesting stuff started happening again at the end, and then it made me pissed off that I don't have book number 6. It's not coming out till next year. So all of that to say, just be prepared to be engrossed. know that there's a dip, you know, when it gets to book number 4 of the war book, but you'll want to keep going. And now I'm going to read the next series that's kind of an extension of this, part of this universe. So there you go. Those are the 20 books that I read in October.